People don't just vanish, not without reason, not without a trace. Yet, throughout history, ordinary men and women have stepped out of sight and slipped into the impossible. Their cars found still running, their dinners still warm, their voices echoing through chilling 911 calls before fading into silence. From hikers disappearing mid-step to travellers caught on camera moments before they were swallowed by thin air. These are not ghost stories. These are real cases and an unsettling truth. Sometimes reality itself simply stops making sense. It was a warm summer afternoon in North London, August 2nd, 2008. The city was alive with the usual weekend rhythm, buses rolling past, chatter on the streets, and the sound of distant sirens cutting through the air. Somewhere in the middle of this ordinary day, a 16-year-old boy named Alexander slowly, quietly vanished. Alex was no runaway. He was a bright student from Islington, just days away from his 17th birthday, planning his future. Those who knew him describe him as polite, ambitious, and fun to be around, someone who always made people laugh. That morning he had gone to visit a friend in Edmonton. When he left around noon, he said he was heading home. He never made it there. At first, his disappearance didn't seem unusual. Teenagers sometimes stayed out overnight, maybe crashed at a friend's place. But when Alex didn't show up to his mother's birthday the next day, something he would never miss. Alarm bells began to ring. His phone stopped working and his Oyster card showed no new activity. It was as if he had simply stepped off the map. Days turned into weeks. Police canvassed the areas he frequented, his school, the local parks, the friends' homes he often visited. No sign. CCTV footage from buses and nearby stations was reviewed, but Alex's trail ended at the doorstep of that friend's house in Edmonton. There were no confirmed sightings afterward, not a single verifiable clue. His mother, Ruth, refused to believe he was gone without explanation. She printed hundreds of flyers, posted them across London, and gave interviews appealing for help. The Metropolitan Police classified his disappearance as high risk, but leads quickly dried up. Some suggested he might have been targeted by local gangs, others speculated he'd left the city voluntarily, but there was no evidence for either theory. As months turned into years, Alexander's name faded from public headlines, though his family kept his face alive in the missing people database. In 2015, police re-examined the case under new missing person protocols. Detectives interviewed old acquaintances and reopened contact with Alex's friends, but the investigation again stalled. The strangest part of the story is how utterly ordinary his day had been. He hadn't packed a bag, withdrawn money, or sent any message of distress. The small details, a broken phone, a casual goodbye, an unfinished plan to visit his grandmother, are what make his disappearance so haunting. Even now, nearly 2 decades later, there are no confirmed sightings, no remains, and no clear theory. The image of a teenage boy walking through the summer streets of London, unaware that his next step would be his last known moment, lingers as one of the city's quietest mysteries. For Ruth Slowly, hope remains. She says she still imagines him walking through the door, older now, smiling the same way he used to. For those who hear Alexander's story, it's a reminder that people can disappear, not in the wilderness or at sea, but right in the heart of a city filled with millions. A reminder that behind every missing person poster is a life, frozen in time, waiting to be found. On the morning of June the 16th, 1990, in the quiet, picturesque town of Llangollen, North Wales, the streets were beginning to stir with life. Shops opened one by one, and the early summer breeze carried the scent of flowers and fresh pastries. Among the shopkeepers preparing for the day was 52-year-old Trevelyan Evans, a well-known and well-liked antique dealer. Trevelyan arrived at her shop, Attic Antiques, located on Church Street, just before 9 a.m. She unlocked the wooden door, opened the window shutters, and arranged a few items in the display. Business that morning was slow, and Trevelyan spent time chatting briefly with passers-by and a delivery man. Everything about the day appeared normal, unremarkable even. By lunchtime, a note appeared in the shop window, handwritten in blue ink on a scrap of paper. It read, "Back in 2 minutes." That was the last confirmed communication from Trevelyan Evans. She never came back. The note was left around 12:40 p.m. Witnesses would later report seeing her walking toward the town centre shortly after, possibly carrying a handbag and some fruit. But no one saw where she went next. Her car, a dark blue Ford Escort, was left parked nearby, untouched. Her handbag, keys and jacket were found in the shop. Money in the till remained. There were no signs of struggle, no broken glass, no overturned furniture. It was as if she had stepped out momentarily and evaporated into thin air. The police launched a widespread search across the town and the surrounding countryside. Divers scoured the nearby River Dee, helicopters flew overhead, dogs sniffed through forest trails, and officers knocked on every door. But there was nothing, not even a shoe print. With no CCTV footage in those days, and no mobile phone signals to track, the trail went cold quickly. What made her disappearance even more perplexing was her life leading up to that day. Trevelyan had recently returned from a short holiday in Rhuddlan, seemingly relaxed and in good spirits. There were no major personal issues reported, no enemies, no financial trouble, no behaviour that suggested she planned to vanish. Her husband Richard was away at the time, working on renovations at their holiday bungalow. He too was stunned when she vanished. Over the years, numerous theories surfaced. Some believed she may have suffered a sudden medical event, like amnesia or disorientation. Others whispered of a possible secret lover, a planned escape, or an encounter with someone dangerous. In the absence of evidence, speculation filled the silence. One report claimed Trevelyan was seen talking to a well-dressed man near the shop that day, but no such person was ever identified. By the mid-2000s, the case had become one of Britain's most baffling unsolved disappearances. Her family never gave up hope. Each anniversary brought fresh appeals for information. But despite periodic police reviews and public interest, Trevelyan's fate remains a complete mystery. A woman known for her quiet routine and love for antiques had vanished from a busy town in broad daylight, with only a note to mark her departure. The shop eventually closed, its windows empty, a ghost of a place where time had once stood still. For many in Llangollen, her story became part of the town's folklore, an unsolved question etched into its cobblestone streets. And for those who still remember Trevelyan Evans, the most haunting detail isn't how she vanished, but how ordinary the moment was when it happened. May 1st, 1991. It was a quiet, ordinary day in the small town of Fermoy, County Cork, Ireland. Connor and Sheila Dwyer, a couple in their early 60s, woke up in their modest bungalow and had breakfast like they always did. The Dwyers were well-respected members of the community, gentle, reserved, and consistent in their routines. Connor was a retired farmer and Sheila a homemaker. They lived a peaceful life, had raised a family, and were known for their kindness and humility. That morning, the couple set out in their white Toyota Cressida. They were reportedly going to visit relatives and run a few errands around town. Several neighbours waved to them as they left. Nothing seemed unusual. They drove off and were never seen again. Their disappearance would become one of Ireland's most perplexing unsolved mysteries. When the Dwyers failed to return home that evening, their family grew concerned. It wasn't like them to stay out late without informing someone. Calls went unanswered. The following morning, with no sign of the couple or their car, their relatives contacted Gardaí, Ireland's national police. A search was immediately launched. Investigators retraced their possible route. Witnesses claimed to have seen the Dwyers driving through various nearby towns, but no sighting could be verified. Their bank accounts remained untouched. Their home showed no signs of disturbance. The white Toyota Cressida was gone. No CCTV footage, no roadside debris, no trace. As days turned into weeks, the mystery deepened. Extensive searches were conducted across Cork and neighbouring counties. Rivers, lakes and wooded areas were combed. Helicopters scanned the terrain. Posters with the Dwyers' faces were pinned up across Ireland. Still, nothing. It was as if the couple and their car had simply vanished off the face of the earth. Over the years, various theories emerged. Some speculated they had driven off the road accidentally, perhaps into a lake or ravine. Others whispered darker possibilities: foul play, robbery gone wrong, or even mistaken identity leading to an abduction. However, no concrete evidence supported any of these ideas. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, as forensic technology advanced, Gardaí revisited the case. Sonar equipment was used to scan deep bodies of water. But once again, the searches yielded nothing. The absence of clues, no vehicle, no remains, not even a fragment of license plate, only made the case more disturbing. What troubled investigators and family most was how utterly normal the Dwyers' day had been. They left home in daylight on a public road in a recognisable vehicle. In a small community where everyone knew everyone else, it seemed impossible for them to disappear unnoticed. As of today, over 3 decades later, the case remains cold. No credible leads have surfaced. The white Toyota Cressida, registration number 5797ZT, is still officially missing, a ghost car from a forgotten time. To this day, their family continues to remember them, their smiles, their routines, their love for simple things. The Dwyers weren't famous. They didn't lead a life of scandal or crime. They were just 2 people who went out one morning and never came back. Ireland holds few cases as quietly haunting as this one, not because of what we know, but because of how much we don't. In a land full of green hills and winding roads, the silence around Connor and Sheila Dwyer's disappearance echoes still. The sun dipped low over Cleveland, Ohio on the evening of August 24, 1951, casting a warm orange hue over the quiet neighbourhoods of the city's west side. It was the kind of late summer day that children cherished, the final stretch of freedom before school returned. Among the children playing in the streets and parks that evening was a 10-year-old girl named Beverly Rose Potts. Beverly was a bright, curious, and well-mannered child. She loved music, particularly dance, and had been excited all week about a special event, the Showagan, a travelling youth talent show being held that night at Halloran Park, just a short walk from her home. She had gone with a friend, but when her friend had to return home early, Beverly decided to stay behind and watch the rest of the performances alone. She told her friend not to worry. She knew the area well, had walked it dozens of times, and it was still light out. As far as anyone knew, Beverly intended to stay just a bit longer before heading home, less than 10 minutes away. But Beverly never returned. When 9:30 p.m. passed without any sign of her, her family became concerned. Her mother called out into the neighbourhood, asked neighbours if they'd seen her, but no one had. Panic set in quickly. By 10 p.m, Beverly's parents contacted the police. The following morning, a full search began. In the 1950s, child abductions weren't as commonly feared as they are today, especially in safe suburban neighbourhoods. But this case shocked the community. Hundreds of volunteers joined law enforcement in scouring the area. Police officers went door to door, searched sewers, combed parks and backyards. They found nothing. Beverly's disappearance was front-page news by the next day. Radio broadcasts pleaded for tips. Reporters from across the state descended upon Cleveland. Flyers with her photo, a bright-eyed girl with dark hair and a wide smile, were posted in store windows and on telephone poles. The city became gripped with fear. Parents stopped letting their children play outside unsupervised. Strangers were eyed with suspicion. Yet despite an extensive search, no trace of Beverly was ever found. No clothing, no witnesses, no sound. Leads came in by the dozens. Some claimed to have seen a man with a young girl near the park. Others swore they saw Beverly walking alone. Tips from as far away as Canada flooded in, but none led anywhere concrete. Police interviewed hundreds of people, even used lie detector tests, but could not identify a suspect. Over the years, the case became one of Cleveland's most haunting mysteries. Investigators never closed the file. In the decades that followed, occasional new leads and confessions would reignite public interest, but none proved reliable. One man, decades later, claimed on his deathbed that he had abducted Beverly, but even that story fell apart under scrutiny. What made Beverly's case so chilling was its simplicity. A girl vanished within walking distance of her home, surrounded by neighbours in daylight. There was no chaos, no cry for help, no evidence, just absence. Her parents never moved away, hoping she might one day return. Her mother left the porch light on for years. They both passed away without ever learning what happened to their daughter. Today, Beverly Potts' story lives on in whispers, a cautionary tale that echoes through generations. The little girl who went to see a show and never came back. A mystery etched into the city's soul. A reminder that even in the safest places, the unexpected can unfold in the quietest of moments. It was a cold and rainy Saturday night on November 2nd, 1996, in the seaside town of Cowes on the Isle of Wight. Streets were slick from the drizzle, puddles reflecting the yellow glow of street lamps. Among the teenagers wandering around town that evening was 16-year-old Damien Nettles, tall, lanky, with messy brown hair and a quiet charisma that made him well-liked, though not particularly well understood. Damien was a typical teenager in many ways. He had a rebellious streak, a passion for music, and an independent spirit. That night, he told his mother he was going out with friends, which wasn't unusual. He was dressed in a black jacket, baggy jeans and trainers. He left the family home in Gurnard shortly after 6 p.m. and boarded a bus into Cowes. It would be the last time his family saw him. He spent the evening drifting between locations in town, stopping by a friend's house, visiting a local party, and later grabbing chips from a takeaway shop. CCTV footage captured Damien at various times throughout the night, including the final known sighting just after 11:30 p.m, when he was seen walking alone near the high street. In that clip, he seems slightly disoriented, stumbling slightly, looking over his shoulder. Then, he vanishes. When Damien failed to return home that night, his family wasn't immediately alarmed. He had occasionally stayed over at a friend's, but by the next day, with no word, his mother Valerie began to worry. Calls to friends yielded nothing. No one had seen him since late that night. She contacted the police, only to be told that it was too soon to panic. He was probably just being a teenager, they said. Give it time. But Valerie knew her son. Something was wrong. She began her own search, retracing Damien's steps, handing out flyers, visiting the spots he had been seen. CCTV footage was requested, but by the time police acted, much of it had been erased due to outdated data retention policies. What remained was incomplete. Crucial moments were lost forever. As days turned to weeks, the case took darker turns. Tips began to emerge, whispers of Damien being involved in an altercation, rumours of local drug dealers, and vague stories of him getting into a car that night. Police began investigating possible foul play. Several people were arrested over the years in connection to Damien's disappearance, but no charges were ever filed. The only thing that became more certain with time was that Damien hadn't just run away. His mother never stopped pushing. She appeared on TV, campaigned for better support for missing teens, and fought to keep Damien's name in the headlines. She believed her son was murdered and that the truth was being hidden by fear and silence. Her tireless advocacy turned Damien's case into one of the most haunting unsolved disappearances in the UK. More than 2 decades later, Damien's fate remains unknown. No remains have been found, no confession has emerged. The unanswered questions are as raw as they were in 1996. What happened on that rainy night in Cowes? Why did he appear so confused in the final footage? And why has no one come forward with the truth? To this day, Valerie keeps his memory alive. The boy who made jokes at the dinner table, who played guitar alone in his room, who left one night to meet friends, and never came home. Damien Nettles wasn't a runaway or a troublemaker. He was a son, a brother, a friend, and someone, somewhere knows what happened to him. On a quiet afternoon in March 1977, in the rolling green hills of County Donegal, 6-year-old Mary Boyle vanished without a trace. It was just after lunchtime on March 18th, a day that began like any other. Mary and her family had travelled to her grandparents' rural farm in Cashlard, near Ballyshannon, to visit during the Easter break. The air was crisp, the fields damp from earlier rain, and the winding country roads were still. For such a remote, peaceful setting, it was unthinkable that anything tragic could occur. Mary was one of identical twin girls, small and bright-eyed with a confident, playful spirit. She and her twin sister Anne were inseparable, always running through fields, climbing gates, and laughing together. But that afternoon, Mary followed one of her uncles across the farmland to return a ladder. He walked ahead, and at one point, Mary turned back toward the house. That simple, ordinary decision became the pivot on which the mystery would hang. Moments later, Mary was gone. At first, the family assumed she had wandered off to play or had gone back inside. But as the minutes turned into an hour, panic took hold. The remote nature of the area made it even more chilling. There were few houses nearby, and the wide fields meant there were no easy hiding spots. The local Gardaí were alerted quickly, and within hours a massive search had begun. Volunteers, neighbours, police officers and even soldiers combed the surrounding fields, streams and bogland. Helicopters hovered overhead, while divers plunged into lakes and wells. People shouted her name across hillsides as the countryside echoed with desperation. The community came together in an overwhelming show of support. But despite the intensity of the search, not a single piece of evidence was found. No footprints, no clothing, no sign of a struggle. Mary had simply vanished. As the hours turned into days and then weeks, questions began to arise. How could a child disappear in such a short span of time, in a place so open without being seen or heard? And then came the theories that Mary had been abducted, possibly by someone she knew. Some speculated that she had fallen into a hidden crevice in the bogland. Others whispered darker suspicions that someone close to the family may have had something to hide. In the years that followed, Mary's case became Ireland's longest-running missing child investigation. A growing number of campaigners and journalists took interest, including her own sister Anne, who as an adult would become one of the most outspoken voices demanding justice. She firmly believed that Mary had been murdered and that the truth was being suppressed to protect someone known to the family. There were numerous police reviews and fresh appeals for information. Some witnesses came forward with troubling stories, alleging they had been silenced or discouraged from speaking up. Despite mounting pressure, no one has ever been arrested in connection with Mary's disappearance. Her remains have never been found. Decades later, the name Mary Boyle still resonates across Ireland. Her disappearance is not just a tragedy. It has become a symbol of unanswered questions, of community silence, and of the fear that justice can be delayed indefinitely. Her family continues to fight, to search, and to speak out, keeping her memory alive and refusing to let her fade into the past. Mary was only 6 years old, a child who went for a walk on a quiet afternoon in the Irish countryside and never came home. January 12, 1970 was supposed to be a perfect summer day in New South Wales, Australia. The sun was blazing, and families across the region flocked to the beaches to enjoy the warmth and sea breeze. Among them was the Grimmer family, parents Carol and Vince, both originally from the UK, and their 4 children, including 3-year-old Cheryl Jean Grimmer. They had moved from Bristol, England, just 2 years earlier in search of a better life, and had settled in the coastal city of Wollongong. That Monday morning, the family packed into their car and drove to Fairy Meadow Beach, a popular local spot with gentle waves and a nearby surf club. Cheryl was full of energy, bouncing around in her swimsuit and towel. Her older brothers played in the sand and splashed in the surf while Carol looked on. Around midday, with the sun at its peak and the sand scorching hot, the children were told it was time to wash off and get ready to go home. Cheryl and her brothers walked up to the nearby change rooms at the surf club. The boys went into the men's side. Cheryl, too young to go in alone, was told to wait just outside. That was the last time anyone in her family ever saw her. Moments later, when the boys emerged, Cheryl was gone. At first, they thought she might have wandered off to their mother or back toward the beach, but she was nowhere. Panic set in quickly. Beachgoers began combing the area. Carol Grimmer ran up and down the shoreline shouting her daughter's name. The surf club and surrounding sand dunes were searched within minutes. Police were called immediately. The area was locked down and a full-scale search was launched within hours. Authorities checked every car leaving the parking lot. Helicopters flew over the beach. Police divers scoured the nearby ocean and inlets. Volunteers and off-duty lifeguards searched the dunes and bushland, hoping to find a crying child who might have simply wandered off, but Cheryl had vanished, without a scream, without a footprint, without a single trace. Witness reports trickled in. A few claimed to have seen a man carrying a small child wrapped in a towel away from the changing block. Another said they saw someone drive off in a white car moments after Cheryl disappeared. But none of these tips could be confirmed, and no solid suspect emerged. Days turned into weeks. The Grimmer family was devastated. Cheryl's disappearance made national headlines. Posters of her small face, chubby cheeks, wide eyes, strawberry blonde hair were plastered across the country. offers of rewards were made, but the trail remained cold. What followed over the decades was a case that haunted the nation and confounded law enforcement. Multiple confessions were made by people seeking attention, but none could be proven. The police case files grew thicker, but progress stalled. Carol and Vince never gave up hope. They believed someone knew what happened and simply hadn't come forward. Then, in a stunning development nearly 50 years later, in 2017, police arrested a man in connection with Cheryl's disappearance. The man had allegedly confessed as a teenager back in 1971, but due to his age at the time and legal protections for minors, the confession had never been used in court. With advancements in investigative methods and persistence from cold case detectives, the confession resurfaced. The man was charged with Cheryl's murder. However, in 2020, the case suffered a devastating blow. The court ruled that the confession was inadmissible due to the way it had been obtained, without a parent or lawyer present. With no forensic evidence or corroborating witnesses, the case collapsed. The charges were dropped. Cheryl's fate remains legally unresolved. Over half a century has passed since that bright summer day at Fairy Meadow Beach. Her family, now scattered across Australia and the UK, still waits. They have never stopped calling for justice. Cheryl Jean Grimmer became more than a missing child. She became a symbol of hope, heartbreak, and the enduring need for answers. The 27th of November 1995 started like any other chilly Monday in the quiet village of Betchworth, Surrey. The rolling countryside, narrow lanes and leafless trees gave the place a serene, almost storybook appearance. But that serenity would be shattered by the disappearance of 16-year-old Ruth Wilson, a straight-A student with a love of music and books, and whose absence would leave behind decades of unanswered questions. Ruth was a clever, thoughtful teenager. She played violin in the school orchestra, sang in the choir, and was often described as quiet but fiercely independent. She lived with her father and stepmother, having lost her mother, Nesta, years earlier, under circumstances she was only just beginning to understand. Ruth had grown up believing her mother had died in an accident, but around this time she had begun to uncover the truth. Nesta had died by suicide. It's a revelation many believe weighed heavily on Ruth's mind in the days leading up to her vanishing. On that Monday morning, Ruth said goodbye to her family and left for school as usual. She arrived at Ashcombe School in Dorking but never attended classes. Instead, she spent time in town, visited a local library, and was seen buying flowers and drinks. Around 4 p.m, she took a taxi to a secluded spot near Box Hill, a local beauty area with steep hills and wooded trails. The driver would later recall that she seemed calm, even cheerful, and that she asked to be dropped near a particular footpath. What happened next remains a mystery. Ruth was never seen again. When she didn't return home that evening, her family assumed she might be with friends or delayed. But by the following day, worry had turned to panic. The police were alerted, and soon a massive search operation was underway. Helicopters scanned the landscape. Dogs tracked through the undergrowth. Volunteers and officers combed the woods around Box Hill. Despite the intensity of the effort, they found nothing. No bag, no note, no clothing. It was as if Ruth had stepped into the forest and melted into the earth. As investigators dug deeper, more details emerged that suggested Ruth's disappearance may have been premeditated. She had made 2 appointments for the following day, one with an optician, another with a friend. She had also asked another friend to meet her after school that Monday, though the friend had declined. These little threads, some pointing to a plan, others to normal teenage routines, created a confusing tapestry. Was Ruth intending to vanish? Or was she meeting someone? Was she in trouble? Or was this a cry for help gone too far? Over the years, rumours swirled. Some believed she had taken her own life, following in the tragic footsteps of her mother. Others thought she may have staged her disappearance, hoping to escape a life that felt suffocating. A few were convinced she had met with foul play, abducted by someone she trusted perhaps, but no evidence ever surfaced. There was no body, no sightings, no contact, nothing. In 2006, a BBC documentary revisited the case. Reigniting public interest, friends of Ruth spoke openly about her emotional state, about the burden of secrets and how she seemed to be carrying more than a teenager should. Her father, however, remained largely silent in the media, leading to speculation that there was more to the story than met the eye. Today, nearly 3 decades later, the image of Ruth Wilson, with her round glasses, gentle expression and quiet strength, lingers like a shadow across the hills of Box Hill. Her case remains officially open, her name still on missing persons registers. But for those who knew her, it's not just the mystery that haunts them. It's the absence, the silence, the hollow space where answers should be. Ruth didn't leave behind a note, only questions. And in the end, the girl who disappeared into the woods became a symbol, not only of loss, but of the invisible battles so many young people face, often in silence. It was a grey, overcast morning on March 7th, 2018, in the coastal town of Worthing, West Sussex. A typical English seaside town, its streets were lined with Victorian homes, independent shops, and the quiet rhythm of daily life. That morning, 30-year-old Georgina Garsalar left her mother's house, casually telling her family she had a few errands to run and might visit the job centre. It wasn't out of the ordinary. Georgina often came and went with little fanfare, but when she failed to return, and hours turned into days, her disappearance would unravel into one of the most complex and emotionally charged missing persons cases in modern British history. Georgina was a mother of 2 young boys. Described by her family as bright, warm and fiercely independent, she had also faced her share of struggles. In the months leading up to her disappearance, she had been dealing with personal challenges, relationship issues, mental health concerns, and the daily pressures of raising children while trying to get her life back on track. Despite the chaos, she was deeply loved and held tightly to a core network of family and friends. She wasn't someone who would disappear without a trace, and certainly not without contacting her children. That morning, CCTV footage captured Georgina walking through Clifton Food and Wine, a local corner shop. She appeared composed, dressed casually in a black jacket, jeans and trainers, with her phone in hand. That clip, grainy and brief, is the last confirmed sighting of her. After that, Georgina vanished. Her phone stopped making calls shortly after 3 p.m. It last connected to a tower near Worthing Hospital, close enough to raise immediate concerns, yet far enough that it didn't narrow the search. Her social media went silent. There were no bank transactions, no contact with friends, and no confirmed sightings. The sudden and total silence was alarming. Her family reported her missing quickly, but early police efforts were limited. Sussex police initially treated the case as a low-risk disappearance, assuming Georgina might return on her own. Days passed without any significant leads, and the trail began to go cold. As weeks turned into months, frustration mounted. Her mother, Andrea, took to the streets with posters, organised community searches, and gave interviews pleading for help. Her determination forced the case back into the spotlight, and under public pressure, police upgraded the investigation to a potential homicide. By then, however, crucial time had been lost. CCTV footage from key areas had been overwritten, and multiple digital leads, including Georgina's mobile phone activity and online messaging, were not followed up on promptly. Friends reported strange behaviour in Georgina's social circles in the days before her disappearance. Rumours swirled about a violent altercation, possible drug involvement, and dangerous acquaintances. But no physical evidence ever emerged. Nobody. No clear motive. No closure. The investigation was reviewed several times, each report pointing to missed opportunities, limited resources, and growing tensions between the police and Georgina's family. Andrea became one of the loudest voices for justice, not just for her daughter, but for all missing women whose cases were neglected or dismissed too easily. Georgina's face became a symbol on walls, posters, vigils, and petitions. Her piercing eyes, framed by long hair, stared out at a public increasingly aware of how easily vulnerable people, especially women, can disappear without accountability. Over 5 years have now passed. Her children are growing up without answers. Her mother continues to fight. And Worthing, a town used to the rhythm of tides and seasons, still carries the quiet ache of a mystery unresolved. Georgina Garsalar didn't vanish in a storm or a faraway land. She walked down a familiar street on an ordinary day and was swallowed by silence, Somewhere someone knows what happened, and until the truth comes out, her story remains a haunting echo of lives interrupted and justice delayed. It was the last day of school, May 17th, 2001, in Phoenix, Arizona. For most students at Paradise Valley High, it was a day of relief and excitement. The start of summer meant freedom, friends, and the end of another long academic year. For 17-year-old Alyssa Turney, it was supposed to be no different. She was bright, quick-witted, and creative, known for her sarcastic humor and edgy style. But beneath her confidence, Alyssa carried the kind of restlessness that comes from growing up in a home shadowed by tension and control. That afternoon, she vanished, and what initially appeared to be a teenage runaway case would unravel into one of the most chilling and perplexing disappearance stories in American history. Alyssa was raised by her stepfather, Michael Turney, after her mother died when she was just 8 years old. Michael had adopted her and her younger half-sister, Sarah. Outwardly, the household seemed ordinary. 2 daughters, a widowed father, a suburban home. But Alyssa often confided in friends that things weren't as they appeared. She described her stepfather as overprotective and controlling, with strict rules that often left her feeling suffocated. She wanted independence. She wanted out. On that warm May afternoon, Michael picked Alyssa up from school early. He said they had plans to go out for lunch and discuss her upcoming summer. According to his later account, they had a minor argument during the drive, about her wanting more freedom, about school, and about her future. Afterward, he claimed to have dropped her back home, where she stormed off to her room. He said he left to run errands, and when he returned, Alyssa was gone. On her desk, he found a handwritten note. It read, "Dad and Sarah, when you dropped me off at school today, I decided I really am going to California. Sarah, you'll be fine. Dad, I'm sorry. Love, Alyssa." At first, police took the letter at face value. Teenagers ran away all the time, especially ones who clashed with their parents. Alyssa had previously talked about visiting California, but as days passed with no phone calls, no withdrawals from her bank account, and no contact with friends, doubts began to grow. Her backpack and belongings were still in her room. None of her clothes were missing. She had simply vanished. The case remained stagnant for years, filed away as a likely runaway. But in 2008, everything changed. Sarah, then an adult, began asking questions about her sister's disappearance. When she went through old files, inconsistencies in her stepfather's story emerged. Michael Turney, once the concerned parent, now seemed at the center of a much darker narrative. Detectives reopened the case, and what they discovered was chilling. Michael had surveillance cameras throughout his home, including hidden recorders. He claimed to have monitored his daughters for safety, but no footage from the day Alyssa vanished could be found. In his garage, investigators found something else: more than 20 homemade pipe bombs, along with a manifesto declaring war against the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, his former employer. Michael was arrested and served time for the weapons, but questions about Alyssa remained unanswered. Sarah, refusing to give up, launched a campaign to bring attention to her sister's case. She appeared on podcasts, television shows, and social media, gaining national attention for her relentless pursuit of truth. Public pressure led police to classify Alyssa's disappearance as a homicide. In 2020, nearly 2 decades after that summer day, Michael Turney was charged with second-degree murder in connection with Alyssa's disappearance. Yet, in 2023, he was acquitted due to lack of physical evidence. Alyssa's body has never been found. What remains is a haunting portrait of control, secrecy, and unanswered questions. A family torn apart, a sister still searching, and a young woman whose voice, silenced too soon, echoes through the tireless efforts of those who refuse to let her be forgotten. In the early hours of December 8th, 2000, as Dublin's streets glistened under a cold winter rain, 22-year-old Trevor Deely stepped out of a Christmas party and into the heart of a mystery that has confounded Ireland for over 2 decades. It was the last office celebration of the year at Bank of Ireland Asset Management, where Trevor worked in the IT department. The mood had been festive, filled with laughter, drinks, and music. Trevor, known as reliable and easygoing, had stayed out late with friends. not unusual for a Friday morning at the height of the holiday season. Around 3:25 a.m. after the party, Trevor parted ways with his colleagues and walked alone through the deserted streets toward his office on Leeson Street. He had forgotten an umbrella and needed to pick it up, but more importantly, he needed to check a few systems before the weekend. Dublin at that hour was quiet, almost eerie. Christmas lights flickered dimly over empty sidewalks. Few people were around. CCTV footage captured him approaching the bank's back door at 3:35 a.m, where he let himself in and stayed for about 30 minutes. At 4:03 a.m, Trevor was seen leaving the building. He turned onto Baggot Street, heading in the direction of his apartment in the southside suburb of Ballantyre. Along the way, more CCTV footage caught glimpses of him. One crucial frame captured him passing the AIB Bank on the corner of Baggot Street Bridge at 4:14 a.m. He appeared calm, walking steadily, hands in his pockets, dressed in dark clothing and a light-coloured shirt. The rain was still falling, and then, without any further footage or evidence, Trevor disappeared. He never made it home. He didn't show up for work, he didn't contact friends or family. When he missed a planned weekend trip and failed to answer phone calls, alarm bells rang. His disappearance was out of character. Gardaí launched an investigation quickly, but without signs of foul play or immediate clues, progress was slow. Trevor was simply gone, and the only trace was the silent footage of him walking alone through Dublin's rainy streets. But there was one strange detail. An unidentified man wearing dark clothing and standing outside the bank's rear gate just minutes before Trevor arrived. CCTV shows this man seemingly waiting, then following Trevor briefly after he leaves the building. His identity has never been confirmed, and he remains a person of interest to this day. Was he connected to Trevor? Was he following him? Was it coincidence or something more sinister? Despite public appeals, national coverage, and years of speculation, no one has come forward with credible information. The Grand Canal, which runs close to Trevor's walking route, was searched multiple times, including dredging operations and sonar scans, but no evidence was found. The theory that he may have fallen in and drowned seemed plausible, but lacked the closure of physical proof. Other theories emerged, that Trevor had been targeted, perhaps followed, or that his disappearance was linked to a chance encounter turned deadly. Yet without a body, a witness, or a confession, all remained speculation. Trevor's family never gave up. His parents and siblings kept his story alive, speaking to media, organising renewed searches and pushing for cold case reviews. In 2017, new CCTV was released to the public showing the unidentified man more clearly, reigniting interest in the case. That year, Gardaí conducted a massive search at a site in Chapelizod based on a new tip, but once again, it ended with no answers. As of today, Trevor Deely's disappearance remains one of Ireland's most haunting unsolved cases. He was a young man with a future, a steady job, a loving family, no enemies, no signs of distress. His last known act was a quiet walk home after a night of celebration, and then nothing. In a city of lights, under the surveillance of cameras, and amidst the buzz of the holidays, he vanished into the rain-soaked shadows, leaving only questions and a family still waiting for the truth. In the early 1990s, deep in the heart of the Bornean rainforest, a lone Swiss man lived among one of the world's last remaining nomadic tribes. His name was Bruno Manzer, an ethnobiologist, environmentalist, and activist who left behind a life of comfort in Switzerland to live in the dense, humid jungles of Malaysia's Sarawak region. His disappearance in 2000 would become as mysterious and captivating as the life he chose to lead, and his name still echoes in both environmental and human rights circles to this day. Bruno was not an ordinary man. Born in Basel in 1954, he was highly educated, fluent in multiple languages, and intensely curious. But unlike many of his peers, he grew disillusioned with Western materialism. He yearned for something more authentic, something untouched by modern greed. That search led him to the Penan people, an indigenous tribe in Borneo known for their deep connection to the forest and their traditional, semi-nomadic lifestyle. In 1984, he illegally crossed into Malaysia and found them. For 6 years, Bruno lived with the Penan in the rainforest, sleeping under canopies of leaves, eating sago and wild fruits, and learning their language, customs, and way of life. He admired their sustainable living and grew horrified by what he saw happening around them. Illegal logging, deforestation, and violent displacement at the hands of corrupt corporations and government officials. By the early 1990s, Bruno Manzer had transformed into a vocal and highly visible environmental activist. He returned to Europe and used his platform to raise awareness about the destruction of the rainforest and the plight of the pennon. He spoke before parliaments, went on hunger strikes, and staged high-profile protests, including parachuting into the 1992 Earth Summit in Rio and scaling a flagpole in Malaysia's capital. These acts made him a hero to some and an enemy to many. The Malaysian government branded him a criminal. His name was blacklisted, and he was declared persona non grata. Yet, despite the danger, Bruno remained determined to return. He believed he could bring international pressure to bear and empower the pennon to resist the forces destroying their land. In May 2000, Bruno entered Sarawak one final time. It was a secretive journey, made with the help of trusted locals. He was last seen near the Upper Limbang region, a remote area of dense rainforest where he had once lived with the pennon. He reportedly set off on foot with a guide toward a village, planning to meet with tribal leaders and continue his work. He never arrived. For months nothing was heard. No calls, no letters, no sign of life. By October, his friends and family feared the worst. An international search was launched, but the rainforest, vast, unforgiving, and often treacherous, gave up no clues. The Malaysian authorities offered little cooperation, and many believed foul play was involved. Theories ranged from murder by logging interests to fatal misadventure in the jungle. Yet, no body was found. No confession, no evidence. In 2005, he was officially declared dead, but to those who knew him, Bruno's story remains unresolved. His disappearance is not just a mystery of one man, it's a symbol of a larger struggle. The rainforest he fought for continues to shrink. The pennon still face displacement, but Bruno's work sparked something that hasn't faded. His activism helped bring global attention to indigenous land rights and environmental abuse. His foundation continues to advocate for conservation in his name. Even now, more than 2 decades later, some believe he may have survived, choosing to remain hidden among the Penang or lost to the jungle he loved so deeply. Others are convinced he was silenced by powerful enemies. One thing is certain, Bruno Manzer didn't vanish for fame. He disappeared doing what he believed was right, defending the voiceless in a battle that still rages on. In June of 1997, a 51-year-old Australian woman named Marion Barter boarded a plane bound for the United Kingdom. It was a journey that should have marked a fresh chapter, a long-awaited adventure to explore Europe, a break from routine, and a chance to start over after years of quiet personal turmoil. But what began as a trip abroad soon unravelled into one of Australia's most confounding and unsettling missing persons cases. Marion Barter, once a beloved schoolteacher and mother of 2, would never be seen again. Marion was not the kind of person to simply vanish. Born in 1945, she was a vibrant and well-respected woman with a magnetic smile and a deep love for education. She had taught for decades, even winning the prestigious Queensland Teacher of the Year award. Friends and students remembered her as charismatic and kind, someone who could light up a room. But behind her warmth was a woman who had experienced more than her fair share of pain. 2 failed marriages, a string of financial stress, and a lingering sense of dissatisfaction. After raising her children, Marion began to seek something more fulfilling, something just for herself. She sold her house on Australia's Gold Coast, packed her bags, and told her family she was heading to Europe indefinitely. She wanted to explore France, maybe even settle there. She kept in regular contact with her daughter Sally, calling and writing letters from abroad. But by late July 1997, the contact stopped. At first, Sally wasn't too worried. Her mother had always been independent. But when weeks turned into months with no word, she began to dig. And what she found was strange. Marion's passport had never recorded her leaving the UK. In fact, there were no re-entry stamps. Stranger still, she had legally changed her name just before her trip. to Florabella Natalia Marion Remarkle, a name unknown to her family and one that hinted at a possible secret life. Sally filed a missing persons report, and in 1997 the Queensland Police accepted the case. Yet authorities treated it lightly, insisting Marion had likely disappeared by choice. After all, she was an adult with no history of mental illness or instability, and she'd legally changed her name. But that explanation never sat right with Sally. Digging further, she discovered that after the contact had stopped, someone had been withdrawing large sums of money from Marion's bank account in Byron Bay, back in Australia. Between August and October 1997, thousands of dollars were taken out in person. Marion's Medicare card had also been used, indicating that she may have received medical treatment, or that someone was impersonating her, but no security footage or confirmed sightings ever verified her presence. Years passed with no answers. Marion's case faded from public view, but Sally never stopped searching. She combed through records, hired private investigators, and even hosted her own podcast to keep the case alive. In 2020, a new lead emerged. Marion had been in contact with a man named Rick Blum, a convicted con artist with a long history of deceiving women under false identities. Blum admitted to knowing her, but denied any involvement in her disappearance. Still, the timeline and proximity raised serious questions. In 2022, a long overdue coronial inquest into Marion's case was finally launched. The inquiry revealed disturbing gaps in the original police investigation, including the failure to investigate key documents, identities, and bank activity. It also suggested that Marion may have been the victim of coercion or fraud, and possibly foul play. But even now, with heightened public awareness and new testimony, no charges have been filed and no body has been found. Marion Barter's disappearance is more than a cold case. It is a haunting narrative of a woman who sought a new life and may have instead found betrayal. Her daughter's fight for truth, against apathy, denial, and time, is a testament to enduring love and the demand for justice. Somewhere, buried beneath the layers of false identities, missing records, and unanswered questions, is the truth. And until it comes to light, Marion remains lost, her final footsteps echoing in the silence of institutions that failed to follow them. On a crisp Friday afternoon in July 1984, 17-year-old Megan Mulquiney finished her shift at a florist inside the Woden Plaza shopping centre in Canberra. She stepped out of the bustling complex into the fading afternoon light and began walking toward her car in the nearby parking lot. She never made it. In those brief moments, between her last recorded presence inside the mall and the spot where her car waited, Megan vanished without a trace. It was as if the earth had swallowed her whole. Megan wasn't the kind of teenager who ran away. She was well-liked, responsible, and on the cusp of adulthood. She had a close relationship with her parents, who described her as mature beyond her years. She was athletic, involved in sports, and had a clear path ahead. She was preparing to sit for her Year 12 exams and had dreams of a future in environmental science. Her disappearance was sudden, shocking, and completely out of character. Witnesses reported seeing her leave the florist shop around 12:30 p.m, cheerful and casual as she ended her shift. But after that, the timeline becomes murky. A few passers-by claimed they saw a girl matching Megan's description in the Woden car park, speaking to a man beside a light-coloured station wagon. Others mentioned seeing her walking alone across the lot, looking as if she was in a hurry. None of these accounts were confirmed with certainty. Her car, a green Mini, was still parked in the lot, untouched. Her belongings were not taken, and there were no signs of a struggle. Her purse was not found, but everything else in her life was left in perfect order. When she failed to return home that evening, her family was immediately concerned and contacted police. It didn't take long before her case was classified as suspicious. In the days that followed, police scoured the shopping centre and surrounding areas. Flyers with Megan's photograph, a school portrait of a smiling young girl with shoulder-length brown hair and kind eyes, were posted across Canberra. The media picked up the story, and for a brief time, the city was gripped by a sense of collective urgency. But leads were few. Without CCTV coverage in the area and with minimal witness descriptions, investigators found themselves with more questions than answers. Theories ranged from abduction to foul play. Some speculated she may have been taken by someone she knew, while others suspected a stranger with sinister intent. There were whispers of known offenders in the area at the time, men with violent histories who may have crossed her path, yet no arrests were made, no one was charged, and most haunting of all, no remains were ever found. In the years that followed, Megan's name would appear in connection with various investigations, but nothing concrete ever emerged. Her family held on to hope, refusing to believe she had simply disappeared without a reason. Her mother became a quiet advocate for justice, attending missing persons vigils and maintaining contact with police, hoping for that one phone call that might change everything. Despite new forensic technologies and investigative reviews, the case remains unsolved. Over the decades, Megan's disappearance has come to symbolize more than just a single mystery. It's a reminder of how quickly a normal day can spiral into something incomprehensible. A girl goes to work, finishes her shift and walks across a parking lot, then silence. Today, the Woden Plaza, now modernized and renamed, still stands. Shoppers pass through its doors unaware of the shadow it holds. Somewhere, someone knows what happened that day. Someone saw something or heard something. And until the truth is spoken aloud, Megan remains frozen in time, a teenager lost in the gap between ordinary life and the dark unknown. On the evening of July 11th, 1990, 23-year-old Sarah McDiarmid vanished from the platform of the Kananook railway station in Melbourne, Australia. She had been playing tennis with friends earlier that evening and was on her way home, travelling from the city to her suburb. What began as an ordinary night turned into one of Australia's most baffling unsolved mysteries. Her disappearance, silent and sudden, left behind only scattered belongings and a haunting legacy of unanswered questions. Sarah had immigrated with her Scottish family to Australia as a child. Bright, independent, and known for her sense of humour, she had a promising job and close friends. That Wednesday night, after the game of tennis, Sarah caught a train from Richmond Station. Her friends left her at Bond Beach, and she continued alone to the next station, Kananook, where she had parked her red Honda Civic in the commuter car park. It was a quiet station, dimly lit and bordered by dense bushland, a space that felt isolated, even in the early evening. She never made it to her car. The next morning, a trail of disturbing clues was discovered. Her car was still in the parking lot, its doors locked, untouched. But near the vehicle, investigators found a bloodstain on the ground, drag marks in the gravel, and Sarah's cigarette lighter and a small amount of money, as if dropped in a struggle. The signs pointed to a violent confrontation, but no one had heard a scream. No security footage captured the moment. Witnesses only vaguely recalled hearing a woman's voice yelling, "Give me back my keys," the night before. That voice, assumed to be Sarah's, echoed for decades without resolution. The investigation began immediately, growing into one of the largest missing persons inquiries in Australian history. A task force was established. The area was scoured by ground teams, helicopters, divers, yet no trace of Sarah was found. It was as though she had been swallowed by the darkness around the station. Leads came and went, psychics offered visions, tip-offs led nowhere. Over the years, police followed hundreds of potential suspects, including serial offenders operating in Victoria at the time, but none were definitively connected. One name that surfaced repeatedly was that of Paul Denyer, the Frankston serial killer, who had terrorized the same region just 3 years after Sarah's disappearance. Though Denyer denied any involvement, and no evidence linked him to her case, many believed the timeline and geographical proximity were too suspicious to ignore. Still, without a confession or physical evidence, it remained speculation. Sarah's parents, Jim and Sheila McDiarmid, became tireless advocates, not only for their daughter but for other families of the missing. They established the Sarah McDiarmid Foundation, dedicated to assisting those facing similar heartbreak. Their campaign for justice never waned, keeping Sarah's name alive through public appeals and media efforts. Yet despite decades of determination, the case remains cold. Each anniversary, flowers are placed at Kananook Station. A memorial plaque honours Sarah's life, a stark reminder that beneath ordinary commutes and city bustle, dangers sometimes lurk unnoticed. The station itself has changed, lighting has improved, surveillance has increased. But the shadow of July 11th, 1990 has never lifted. Sarah McDiarmid walked into a Melbourne night with every intention of returning home. Her path, short as it was from the platform to her car, was severed by something dark and unseen, and with it, a family's future was forever altered, left suspended in the endless question, what really happened to Sarah? Some disappearances leave clues, others leave only silence, but every case shares one truth: someone was here, and now they're gone. Families still wait by the window, hoping for a knock that never comes. Investigators still chase ghosts in old case files, and the rest of us. We keep asking how someone can simply cease to exist. Maybe the answer isn't in the evidence. Maybe it's in the shadows, in the thin space between the known and the unknown. Because the most terrifying mystery of all is how easily any of us could vanish too. If you want more stories that blur the line between truth and nightmare, subscribe and stay curious.